Hey, hey, welcome to the show, everybody. Glad you could make it. If I'm a few seconds late actually appearing on camera, that's because, as always, I was giving my patrons and channel members until the last second to submit questions ahead of time if they so chose. And now that that's all squared away and taken care of, hi. And as usual, I will be spending the first portion of the show answering the pre-submitted questions from my patrons and channel members. So if you're watching live and you're in the live chat, hi people in the live chat, and you have something that you want me to talk about or a question you want to ask me in the live chat, please, if possible, hold on to whatever you want to say or whatever you want me to talk about, or if you were going to throw in a super chat that you wanted me to acknowledge, whatever it is, please try to hold on to it until I get through all of the patron and member questions. And then at that point, I will spend the rest of the show paying full attention to the live chat. So couple of quick ones that I just noticed in the chat before I switch over. Kirok 2011 said, I'm going through my rewatch of Picard. You want to talk about pain? When I am done, there will be a question coming. I can't wait. I hope you make it through okay. And the Average Joe says, and someone asked this in the chat earlier before we went on the air. Average Joe says, what's your opinion of the CEO shooting situation? I don't give a shit. I disapprove of assassinating people just on principle, but don't ask me to get upset about this guy getting killed. Like, don't, a billionaire got shot. Like, I'm against it on principle. I don't recommend it. I'm not like, cheering it on or whatever. But do I feel bad for him when how many people die of preventable causes in this country every day who aren't billionaires? I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. I have a little bit of a germ of an idea for a video essay that I might do about it, but I haven't had time to do it yet. I might, if I think I can get through it without writing it all down, I might try to do it as one of my off the cuff kind of impromptu videos during the week next week. But if not, I'll see if I can come up with something and write it down. But I have something to say related to it. But as for how I feel about that specific situation, sucks to be him. All right, let's go to the patron and member questions. And the first one of these comes to us from the Parallel Patreon, who says, so I've really enjoyed your alternate timelines series and was wondering if you'd do a similar thing for parallel universes at some point. This is, of course, referencing my Star Trek Retro Reviews series, where I review episodes of the first 6 Star Trek shows. Parallels is personally one of my favorite episodes, and I'd love a retro review from you on that sometime. Well, I do have a batch of parallel universe episodes planned, but it is not on the schedule for a little while. I just laid out the schedule for the reviews that I'm going to do for 2025, and that batch is not on it. So I'm not going to get around to it this coming year, but maybe after that. The thing is, there's a lot of Star Trek episodes to review. But yes, I have had the idea to do a batch of parallel universe episodes. And obviously Parallels is going to be one of those. And I really like that episode too. I'll just give you a little spoiler in case you want to know, if you just want to know what I think of that episode until I write the full review of it. I really like that episode too. I think that's one of the better episodes of TNG's final years. I really like that episode. Oasis. Hey, Steve, I hope you're having a good day today. I don't know about you, but I am so glad Blue Sky is catching on more and more, and that more people are leaving the dump that is Twitter behind. Usually, sites like Twitter, when a competitor starts up, they have the network and such behind them to strive, but this time is very much different in my view. Anyway, do you have a favorite thing that Blue Sky has done that Twitter is failing to do? Cheers. Not really. I honestly don't pay that close attention to it. I am on Blue Sky, and I'm very happy to see that I'm picking up a lot of followers there. When I post things on Blue Sky, I cross post things to, Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon, like all of the social sites that I'm on. If I'm sharing like a video or a link to something, I share it on all of those. And if I come up with like, a clever thought or a funny joke or something that I feel is worth sharing, I'll usually share it on all of the sites that I'm on. And I don't really pay that close attention to like how the site operates or what the user interface is like or what they're doing that's different from other ones. Like I don't spend that much time on it, to be honest. So, you know, I really don't know. It seems like a nice place. And I will say and maybe it's just because it's still relatively new and a lot of people are still switching over and a lot of people who found me on the old places are finding me on this new place. But over the past couple of weeks, it feels like I've gotten a lot more engagement on Blue Sky than on Twitter. I haven't checked stats to see like if I'm getting more clicks on my videos from Blue Sky than other places, but it just, the anecdotal sense I have is that, there's a lot more engagement on Blue Sky at this point, but I honestly don't know. Agent Doggett, what mysterious events in Star Trek would you want to see more attention paid to? My personal answer would be the whale probe from Voyage Home. I always thought it was one of the best and most eerie Trek mysteries. Thanks for doing these videos. I recently came across your channel and have something to keep me sane during work now. I'm very glad that you would rather watch my videos than work. I don't really care about stuff like that. Like that's not something that I'm interested in. I instead of looking at things that Star Trek has already done and trying to think of ways that new stories could fill in gaps in old stories, I'm much more interested in seeing new stories. So I don't really have an example of like a mystery. Like as far as the whale probe, I kind of like not knowing where it came from. Like, I think that works for the movie. I like the mystery. I like the uncertainty. We know as much about it as we need to know. You know, it comes out of nowhere. It fucks shit up on Earth until Captain Kirk and his crew get to, go back in time, grab some whales, come back. The whales somehow manage to talk the probe down and it just goes back wherever it came from. Like, I like that. I don't really want to know anything more about it, Like, I guess another example that somebody might say, and it's weird. Maybe the reason I thought of this just now is because it's the same general shape, but like the killer cigars from the Doomsday Machine in original series. Nobody really knows where they came from. There's kind of some vague suggestion that they were the product of some old civilization, and but there's not like a lot of specific backstory about where did the Doomsday Machines come from and how did people build them and what was their purpose and what happened to the people, et cetera, et cetera. And I suppose if you were interested in that sort of thing, you could say, oh, the Doomsday Machines, but I don't care. I don't care where they came from. Like, I think that one works very well in that episode, and that's all I need. So you're kind of, I appreciate the question, but you're kind of asking the wrong guy because I don't care about that kind of stuff. David Colby cannot speak French. We have so much in common. Oh my God. My pals and I get together every week to watch a movie, and this week I got to make them all watch an old favorite classic of mine, Waterloo, a 1970s historical epic made in an unusual collaboration between Italian filmmaker Dino De Laurentiis and the actual literal Soviet Union. Waterloo stars three actors: Rod Steiger with an electrifying performance as a charismatic and aging Napoleon Bonaparte, Christopher Plummer, who sneers every line he gives a pitch-perfect run as the Iron Duke Wellington, and of course, 10,000 Red Army troops as extras. It remains breathtaking and exhilarating to watch what looks like a matte painting begin to move, then realize you're watching thousands upon thousands of men marching in colorful uniforms to their doom under cannon fire and musketry. Oh, it's so good. And they just don't make this anymore because the Soviet Union collapsed and Hollywood is also collapsing. What's your favorite big budget, they don't make this anymore Hollywood epic? First of all, I've never actually seen Waterloo. But I've known about its existence for many years, and I would love to watch it at some point. I just haven't gotten around to. But you make it sound appealing. My favorite big budget, I can't think of a big budget Hollywood movie that I've ever seen that hasn't left me kind of cold. Like there are ones that I appreciate the scale of them, like the really, really big ones, like the Ten Commandments or Cleopatra, or some of the other biblical epics from the 50s and 60s, or Lawrence of Arabia, the David Lean movies, Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago, etc. Um, and a lot of times the spectacle of them is impressive, and they're impressive on a technical level because you realize, oh, look at all of the resources that had to be marshaled and you know to make this happen. And it's way more impressive to see like people on, if you have like a giant crowd scene, like it's a battle scene or some kind of scene where there are thousands of extras. It is a lot more impressive when you know that you're looking at real people who were arranged to be there in that space on the day so that the director could film this scene rather than it being some kind of special effect. But in terms of like the stories and the characters, most of them just kind of leave me cold. I'm just like, oh, I mean, it's not bad, but it doesn't really hit me right here. So like, I don't really have one. I don't really have like a favorite big budget. They don't make them like they used to Hollywood epic, because those were never really my favorites. Um, I do like some of like the big epic silent movies. Again, not for their, not necessarily because I engage with them or get invested with them as stories, but just to see how impressive and how epic and how large scale movies were made back in the 1920s, or in some cases even the late teens. Um, when people who are just casual movie viewers might not have thought. They might have thought that the movies back then were too primitive and they didn't do big, epic, large scale movies like that, but they did. Um, I mean, here's one. It's not a Hollywood movie, but it's another Soviet movie. It's the Battleship Potemkin. The Battleship Potemkin, and I'll give you this one. The Battleship Potemkin is a great fucking movie. And it does have some big crowd scenes in it. And if you count Battleship Potemkin as that kind of a big budget epic, even though it's not a Hollywood movie, then that'll be my pick, because it is artistically very impressive, and it's technically very impressive. So I would say the Battleship Potemkin, if you decide that counts for your category. Felix, hey Steve, new patron here. Thank you very much. I love what you do. I won't say you keep me sane, but I find listening to you very calming. You said Dems should learn from their successes and run progressive candidates. Yet, what's the evidence that this would work in a presidential race? The one conclusion we can draw from the data with certainty is that Americans, including female voters, will not vote for a woman to save their lives. Democrats won when they ran on the economy as the normal guy, or on charisma and vague promises of change. Gore was massively more progressive than Bush. The U.S. just had the most progressive presidency in almost 50 years, and Harris ran on that ticket. Nope. Why would a progressive win? Especially if the DNC just dispenses one, as people imagine, without progressives laying the basis in local electoral politics. I can perfectly picture the resurrected spirit of Che Guevara in AOC's body, and Bernie's head setting fire to Wall Street, and leftists going, not good enough. Well, I'll give you this. There are some people on the very far left who, for some reasons that I understand and for some reasons that I don't understand, are just determined not to vote for anybody. And so in that sense, you're right. There are some people on the left who there's no candidate that you could give them where they would say, okay, I'll vote for them. Those aren't necessarily the people I'm talking about. Those aren't necessarily the people I'm saying that the Democrats need to reach in order to win. There are a bunch of people in this country who lean toward the left, who either don't vote at all or don't vote regularly. Maybe they turned out to vote for Obama, but they haven't voted for anybody since, right? And those are the people that those are the people that often, they say they don't vote for the Democrats because they think the party is too moderate, because they think the party is too centrist, because they think the party isn't different enough from the Republicans. And those are the people that, I think instead of constantly running to the center and trying to pick off enough Republicans or centrists in swing states to win the election, it would be worth a shot, at least, for the Democrats to run as a legitimately progressive party. Not necessarily a far left party either. Not a far left party, just a progressive party, you know? And the evidence is the times that Democrats have won the presidency, not just in the recent history, but, you know, throughout the 21st and 20th centuries. You know, most big Democratic electoral victories were behind candidates that were seen as change candidates, that were seen as progressive candidates, that were not, well, Republicans, but not as much, you know. And I think it would at least be worth a shot. I'm not saying I'm not guaranteeing that it would deliver a landslide victory, but it would at least be worth a try to run to the left, to run a more progressive campaign for president, rather than doing this, I'm going to be bipartisan and I'm going to embrace Republicans and I'm going to, because when Kamala Harris did that, I think that undermined the parts of her campaign that were working. Like, she did have a lot of progressive ideas in her campaign, but then she was also doing stuff like campaigning with Liz Cheney and talking about how, you know, I'm going to have a bipartisan administration and I'm going to appoint Republicans to my cabinet and I'm going to, you know, it's like that. Should we vote for you because you're promising to bring progressive change to the country? Or should we vote for you because you're making a big deal about how you're going to go out of your way to work with Republicans? Like, so yeah. I don't know for a fact that it would work, but I feel very strongly that it's at least worth a try for the party to actually try and make a serious effort to reach out to the lapsed progressive voter. Some random geek who says, I am sure you are glad, Steve, that I didn't say Moulin Rouge is in my top 3 musicals. Well, that would be your problem, buddy, not mine. Is alcohol/booze a drug? That is the question. It is a fact that alcohol is a drug, but I had a viewer who says booze isn't a drug. In fact, he bet me that Social Justice Alchemy would agree with him that alcohol isn't a drug. He lost that bet, but I can understand why he refuses to think that booze is a drug, because he consumes 750 milliliter bottles of 100 proof alcohol each week. Holy shit. Now, I argue with this viewer a lot, but now I am concerned for this viewer. That is heavy alcohol use. Yeah. Sort of signs of alcoholism, which he denies he has. He says that alcohol helps him sleep, which it doesn't. It sedates you. He says, I have a lot of physical and emotional pain. I want to feel numb when I get home. Now, he does say he doesn't drink when he drives or he is at work. He only drinks when he gets home. He also says, I have Irish native heritage. We can hold our liquor, which isn't a good thing either. And numbing either pain doesn't resolve the pain. So is alcohol a drug? Well, first of all, look, I'm not a substance abuse counselor and I am not a physician. I don't have any expertise in this at all, but that sure sounds like an alcoholic to me. And, just because you say you can hold your liquor or you drink it because you want to numb the pain, or, you don't drink and drive. I mean, there's such a thing. That's why there's a term called functional alcoholic. Like, you can still be an alcoholic even if your whole life doesn't completely fall apart. And even if you say you have a legitimate reason for doing it, like drinking that amount of that level, like that strength of liquor every week, that sounds like an alcoholic to me, but whatever. Of course it's a drug. Yes, of course it's a drug. What I find interesting is that even though it clearly is a drug and people use it just like other people use other drugs, we have socially grown the habit of perceiving it as not a drug. That's why we, drugs and alcohol. We don't say drugs, including alcohol. We say drugs and alcohol, even though alcohol is a drug. And people use it like a drug. People use it for the same reasons people use other recreational drugs. People get addicted to it the same way people get addicted to other recreational drugs. It does damage to people the same way other recreational drugs do damage to people. It's a drug. It's a drug. It's just a much more socially acceptable drug than pretty much every other recreational drug that there is. And I find that interesting, and I think that says something about us and about our society and about the choices we make and the lines we draw to sort of sort things into categories that make sense to us. Um, we like drinking booze as a society. We want to preserve drinking alcohol as a socially acceptable thing. So, but we also have decided that recreational drug use is socially unacceptable. So we just draw a line between the two. It's like randomly deciding that Europe and Asia are different continents. No, they're not. Like, look, no, they're not. Culturally, they are. Socially, they are. But if you look at a map, that's the same continent, buddy. So it's the same thing. Alcohol and other recreational drugs, it's Europe and Asia. You can decide for yourself which one you decide is which, but it's the same situation. That's one continent that people decided we're going to pretend are two things for cultural and social reasons. That's alcohol and drugs. Steve. Hi, Steve. So Joe Biden pardoned Hunter, and people are mad. While I am sympathetic to the abuse of power arguments in the sense that the president shouldn't be able to keep their family members from being convicted of crimes, I don't think that really matters when the other party was planning on making Hunter's life hell for the crime of being related to Joe Biden. As far as I'm concerned, Joe did the moral thing, and I'm glad he did it. Thoughts? I mean, that's more or less where I fall on it. I did a video about this earlier in the week where I talked about it in more depth than I will here, but yeah, I mean, I'm not overly fond of the executive pardon power just in general. I just don't, I'm just not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with the idea of saying, oh, the chief executive can intervene and overrule the courts basically for any reason they want. That doesn't seem democratic to me. That doesn't seem in line with the spirit of what we think the judicial system should be. Never mind, the many shortcomings and the way it actually operates. But it just doesn't seem like a thing that presidents or governors or chief executives in government, whatever they are, should have. But given the fact that the power exists and Biden has it, and given the fact that, yeah, like you say, Trump and his people have made no secret of the fact that they are out for blood. They are out for retribution. They're going to attempt to weaponize the justice system to exact revenge on people that they perceive as having wronged them or who are threats to them. And Joe Biden and Hunter Biden are in that group. Joe Biden that's his son, and he has the power as the president until he's no longer the president next month to remove his son from the threat of harm for those people. So that's what he did. And yeah, I mean, does it look good? Maybe not. Should he have done it as a principle of government? Maybe not. But I understand why he did it. And under the circumstances, I'm not mad about it. JD Treat. Hey, Steve, hope you're doing well. Can you help me find some balance? I know full well it's the evil little Trumplings who are going to cause serious harm to any number of vulnerable people in the coming years, but I find myself like 1,000 times angrier at the sinless, too cool for school leftists who sat out the election when it was time to vote because Harris just wasn't up to their standards. It's not productive, but here we are. Any tips, since we've all got to live with the results now? Thanks, love your work. What I tried to do is and the leftists would hate this, but I tried to sort things into a hierarchy. I try to sort things into a hierarchy, and if I ever find myself getting too angry or too annoyed or too preoccupied with people on the left who didn't vote for Harris for whatever bullshit reason they told themselves it was okay not to vote for Harris, I tell myself that despite my disappointment in them for that, and despite my deep aggravation with them over that and over a lot of their bullshit, those people are still on my side. We still, broadly speaking, we want the same thing. We may differ on how to get there. We may differ on how far in a particular direction to go, or how far we can reasonably expect to go under a particular period of time. But generally speaking, those people and me are on the same side. They're not my enemy. The Republicans are my enemy. The Republicans are the enemy of democracy. The Republicans are the enemy of liberty. Donald Trump and his people they are my enemy. They are the threat. They and their supporters are the immediate threat that needs to be focused on and needs to be defended against and needs to be weathered now for, at least the next 4 years. So I remind myself to focus on the real enemy. There are people on my side who I am deeply, deeply disappointed in and annoyed with and frustrated with and mad at, but they're not my enemy. People on the left who didn't vote, I have some pretty big problems with that, as I've talked about before and we'll probably talk about again, but they're not my enemy. They are, as I see it, they are my friends, my allies who are fucking up and making this harder than it needs to be. But they're not my enemy. The Republicans, the conservatives, the right wingers, the fascists, they're the enemy. So remember that. Cast Iron Chaos. I sadly believe the United States of America has finally announced to the world that it is a banana republic ruled by a petty dictator. There will certainly be an official celebration of the 250th birthday of the United States in 2026, less than 2 years from now, but I don't feel like I'll be celebrating. Unless it is demonstrated otherwise, I'm trying to decide if the epitaph of the United States of America would read, 1, born July 4th, 1776, died July 1st, 2024, the date the Supreme Court decided Trump v. United States in his favor, B, July 4th, 1776, to November 5th, 2024, or 3, July 4th, 1776 to January 20th, 2025. Your opinion? I don't know. I mean, it's tempting to say 2016, but I mean, if we're going to play that game, we could probably go back even further than that. Let's say the second one. Let's say November 5th. Let's say November the 5th. Actually, no, you know what? No, forget it. Let's say January 20th. November the 5th was when the lethal dose of morphine was administered, and it's just taking us until January 20th to die. How about that? Is that grim enough for you? That's grim enough for you. So let's do January 20th. Air One Fire, who carries a chair at all times in case someone says, I won't stand for this. Very considerate of you, by the way. Hi, Steve. I finally watched the new movies. Star Trek starts off great, makes me cry when Thor dies, but goes off a cliff after 12 minutes. The story takes ages to pick up, and then it's sparse, contrived. Why Kirk becomes captain makes no sense. Logically inconsistent, e.g. effects of red matter, and padded with entirely boring pew-pew action. Into Darkness is piece of, wait, it's actually good? In the mediocre first half, Kirk is actually given something, and when characters are allowed to actually talk and Cumberbatch is not trying to act, it has me gripped. Then, when they encounter Peter Weller's ship, even the action scenes get fantastic. Kirk's death, Spock in vengeance mode, could do without the member berries, and Beyond is all around amazing and hilarious. Overall, all the actors except BC are great. And as for this not being real Star Trek, it ruins the characters. Shut up, you fucking nerds. Thoughts? I think I like the first one better than you seem to, but other than that, we pretty much agree. I don't like the member berries in Into Darkness either. I think the concept of trying to do like a clever twist sort of flip on Space Seed and Wrath of Khan, I think they execute it as well as they possibly could have, and I think it works a lot better than most people think it works. But I would also, I mean, I could also just do completely without it. I mean, a lot of that movie is original. It's not just like a remake of Wrath of Khan. It does do a lot of its own original stuff. And I think they could have just done more of that instead of trying to do the, it's like Wrath of Khan, only this time it's Kirk. Although, like I said, that part is really well executed. I love, and I've mentioned this before, and I've used this as an example before of how important it is to visualize things in a movie in ways that the audience can understand what the character is trying to do. Um, the scene in Into Darkness where Kirk is trying to fix the Enterprise, and the way they visualize it is the Enterprise is in the interior of the engine. There are these two gigantic nodes that need to be perfectly aligned with each other, and one of them has become misaligned. So Kirk is jumping on it and kicking it to try and push it back into alignment. That's a simple task. We understand immediately what he's trying to do and what he needs to do without needing to have it explained to us. It's visually clear, it's dynamic. We see the character physically trying to do something that takes effort. It's much more exciting than the way they were doing stuff in Star Trek before, especially on TV, where it's just people pushing buttons on a control panel, the most boring, uncinematic thing you could possibly imagine. So I really liked that. I thought the acting was top notch. I wasn't crazy about crashing the ship into a city. That feels like kind of typical mid 2010s, like Michael Bay, Zack Snyder style disaster porn. Not a fan of that, but but at least they're smart enough after that to jump the movie a full year ahead, so we don't have to deal with like the uncomfortable immediate aftermath of it. So I think Into Darkness, despite some problems with it, is a really, really good movie. And yeah, I think Star Trek Beyond is one of the best Star Trek movies, period. I think it's way up there for me. It's behind Wrath of Khan and Undiscovered Country, but it's it in my mind, it's constantly fighting with First Contact for third place in terms of all Star Trek movies. It's a really, really good movie. But I like them all. I like all of the Kelvin Timeline movies. Jan, my first vote for Prez of USA was for George McGovern in 1972. We know how that turned out, so I'm familiar with disappointment after elections. This time is different, though. It's so much worse. The climate crisis will continue to worsen, and I don't know how we recover. But let me say how much I enjoy your frequent videos. They remind me of the need to resist. Now my question. To relieve stress, I turn to Star Trek. I agree DS9 is the best, but to just watch and enjoy, I prefer TOS. Given you have scheduling restrictions, etc., which series is your fave to just kick back and enjoy? TNG. Yeah, TNG. I mean, there are particular Deep Space Nine episodes that I will put on occasionally if I have the time and I feel like just watching something familiar. I don't want to watch like a new movie or something, and I say I just feel like watching some Star Trek and relaxing. I might watch like Sword of Kahless or Dramatis Personae or one of the Deep Space Nine episodes that I just enjoy as just something to watch for fun. But as a series, TNG is I think the the comfort food Star Trek show for me, which is not to say that that's all it is. I mean, because there are some TNG episodes that are really, really, really great and deal with, very important, pertinent political and social issues and do a good job of it. And there are some really tour de force episodes in terms of acting and some episodes that are just fantastically written. Like it's not just bland, comforting, vanilla television. But if I'm looking for something to just kind of kick back and enjoy, and it's going to be Star Trek, it'll probably be TNG more than one of the other shows. Legend de Meister. Bonjour, Steve. In 2011, DC rebooted all of its titles in what they called the New 52, and part of this involved relaunching these titles from issue 1. A lot of DC's titles had this done to them before, like The Flash and Green Lantern, but I nearly fell off my chair when I saw that this would apply to Detective, Action Comics, and the monthly Batman and Superman titles also. I know it's only a number on a cover, and that in and of itself is no guarantee of quality. Indeed, the Court of Owls that featured in Batman at this time is considered one of the best Bat stories in the last decade or so. But geez, man, these 4 titles were first published either before or at the start of World War II. And I think that kind of legacy deserves more respect than being thrown out in an effort to boost sales. Detective and Action have had their pre-New 52 numbering restored, but the Batman and Superman titles have not. I suppose this gripe I have borders on nitpicking, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. I don't have a problem with I don't have a problem with it for the same reason you do. I think, like, as you said in your question, like there have been uh, other books, even some long running books that got issue numbers up into the multiple hundreds that have been restarted with a new number one issue. And in comics, that's considered starting a new volume. Um, so the idea of, restarting a series that has, it's up to like issue 1000 or something, and then restarting it at a new number one. I don't have a problem with it in principle, but my problem with it as far as the New 52 went was that it was just a marketing gimmick. It was another example of DC Comics. And look, I'm a DC guy. I love DC Comics. If you make me choose between the big two, I'm going with DC instead of Marvel, even though I love Marvel too. But DC has gotten into this really terrible habit that they still have not broken themselves out of whenever, things start to, whenever it seems like things are not going as well as they think they need to be going, the answer is always, let's reboot it. Let's do a big company-wide crossover and we'll reboot the universe, and we'll do it again, because they did the New 52, and then 5 years later they did it again, and then they did it again. And it's like, maybe I'm old-fashioned, maybe this is a quaint and naive thought, but just hire talented writers and talented artists and let them tell stories with the characters. Like, if you train fans to expect gimmicks and expect, an obsession with the lore and the continuity, and to expect things to get rebooted every few years, then all the fans who don't like that stuff are going to leave. And the only people you'll have left are the obsessive, pedantic fans who don't even really care about story and character. They're just there to collect the issues and to memorize what happens, because that's literally the only thing they care about. And those are the fans you're going to be stuck with, because you have run off everybody else who might have been loyal readers because they got invested in the stories and they got invested in the characters and they wanted to see what happened to their favorite heroes and their supporting casts next month. You're going to run off those people, and you're just going to be left with the pedantic super nerds. And I can't imagine a worse audience to have for whatever your thing is. But that's kind of the corner that DC has painted itself into, and it's because of stuff like that. So that's why I have a problem with the restarting the numbering, not but they're up to number 700 and they've been, it's the same numbering since World War II. I mean, that's kind of cool, but I don't really care about that in and of itself. John Burns, according to the Associated Press and Wikipedia, Trump won 49.9% of the popular vote in 2024, with 99.9% of the vote counted as of Wednesday, December 4th. In Syria, Assad was being protected in Damascus by Russians, but he's now being protected in Moscow as rebels have taken many areas in Syria. The ruble is at an all-time low. Because of this, neither India nor China, Russia's two main trading partners, are willing to accept the ruble via trade. Future mortgage rates in Russia are going up to 28%. Sanctions on the Russian Euro pipeline turned off by the Ukraine. I know this might change in a few months, but for now, that's what's happening. A coup attempt in South Korea, followed by martial law by the president, countermanded by parliament. Thank God I live in Canada. Anyway, if Trump wants to put peacekeepers in Ukraine, I'm sure Canadians want some guarantees, like air cover for the peacekeepers. That old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. Indeed. I wouldn't mind living in Canada right about now either. I'll tell you that. Depends on what part, though. I'd live in one of the temperate parts, like maybe on the West Coast, like the Vancouver area. I hear that's nice. I wouldn't want to live in one of the like super frigid parts, which is basically most of Canada. I would, if I'm going to move somewhere, I'm not moving to cold weather, right? I'll move somewhere that's the same or somewhat nicer. Anyway, General Contact Unit Problem Child. I came up with a starting premise for a Star Trek episode a while back, but I don't have any idea how the crew, presumably the Enterprise under Pike, would resolve it. They detect a planet emitting signs of warp technology, but when they get there, they find the planet is only mid-industrial, equivalent to Earth around 1850. They beam down and investigate and discover that in 2117 AD, a human cargo ship fell through a wormhole and ended up 911 light years from Earth. Given a top speed of only warp 1.8, they opted to land on the nearest M-class planet. The planet they landed on had native population with a Middle Ages tech level. The pre-Prime Directive humans decide to offer them what advancements to their tech they can in exchange for resources. 140 years later, the humans' descendants have turned into an aristocracy ruling over an oppressed industrial class. The crew are conflicted about if the fact humans started this means they should intervene or not. What would you have the crew do? Well, if I were writing it and if it was Strange New Worlds and Captain Pike, I think you would try to find a way to tell a story that allows the characters to grapple with it for most of the episode, to argue about it, maybe have a couple of the major characters take opposing sides on it, but ultimately the decision comes down to Captain Pike, and he ultimately decides that they can't do anything and that they just have to leave it the way it is. Even though he doesn't like it, even though maybe he wishes that he could do something or wants to do something, he would ultimately decide that if he and Starfleet and the Federation were to intervene in this planet's history now, after all this time has passed and its culture has evolved in the direction that it has evolved, if they were to intervene to do something about it now, they would be guilty of the same sin that the original humans who got here were when they sort of took over, whenever they got there, right? What was it, 200 years ago or so? So that's how I would do it. I would have Pike want to help, but ultimately decide that he can't, or decide that, maybe it doesn't quite fall under the Prime Directive, or you could convince yourself that there's a loophole to the Prime Directive because they're humans and because they were interfering with another society in a way that today would be a violation of the Prime Directive. But Pike would have to decide that ultimately they couldn't do that, and they would have to reluctantly leave that planet to figure out its destiny without them. Although maybe you could do something where, like, there's a rebel group, or there's like a popular uprising to overthrow the aristocracy that isn't at the point where it's going to happen anytime soon. Like, there's not going to be a revolution tomorrow, but maybe someone on the Enterprise could sort of secretly do something to assist the aspiring revolutionaries without Pike's approval. And maybe Pike could find out about it and he would be mad, but he would also understand why they did it. And so he wouldn't punish him all that much, or something like that. Something like that. That's a good idea, by the way. It's a good idea. Brian McKinley, back from the brink. Well, Steve, to tell you that the last month has been difficult for me emotionally would be an understatement. Since the election, I fell into a deep despair that hasn't really gone away, but that I've been able to put aside to do basic life stuff. I really think that if he who shall not be named doesn't suffer a fatal heart attack or get the 25th Amendment invoked on him by Vance, turning out to be a deep mole, that our country might not have elections 4 years from now, and the ones 2 years away won't matter. When a man as evil, stupid, and irresponsible as this controls the justice system, the military, and the lawmaking body, I just don't see what resistance can realistically accomplish. So, what did you think of the Penguin? I thought it was great. I like the Penguin a lot. I thought that Kristen Milioti as Sophia was fucking brilliant. I mean, she was. I went in expecting Colin Farrell as the Penguin to be my favorite part of it. And he was great too. Don't get me wrong. Um, um, Concerns about just the general idea of having an actor play a character in a fat suit aside, he gives a great performance. He creates a brilliant, compelling, tragic character. Um, but I think Kristen Milioti steals the show. Like I think she sneaks up on you. Like she's good from the start. When you first see her, you're like, oh, she's good. She's going to be good in this. But man, I mean, she comes through so strongly by the end, and her character takes so many interesting turns and deepens in such compelling ways. And her performance is just fucking off the chart. So she was great. Everybody was great. All of the actors were fantastic, and I thought it told a really terrific story. I loved the fact that it was set in the fiction of the Batman movie, but it was completely its own thing. It was not worried about tying up loose ends from the movie. It was not worried about setting stuff up for the movie. There weren't like a bunch of side characters from the movie coming in and out. There were a couple of familiar faces if you paid attention, but I mean, other than obviously the Penguin himself. But it told its own story in its own way. It was its own thing. There weren't a ton of comic book references. It wasn't like an Easter egg hunt. It was so different from how this type of show that is a spinoff of a popular superhero franchise is usually done in today's media environment. It was so refreshing. It succeeded as drama very well. Um, I really liked it. I really, really liked it a lot. And thank you for asking me about it. And yes, it is much nicer to talk about something like that than what you were describing in the rest of your question, even though we can't really get away from it. Sweet Tea Gamer. Hello, Steve. I am a fairly new watcher to your channel, but I haven't been able to ask a question due to somehow being muted in the live streams and possibly comments. I've been going through a very interesting time in the last few months. I found myself leaning more left despite not reaching the term leftist or progressive. I've been paranoid and depressed the last few months. It's gotten so bad that I have tried to ask multiple creators for help through Patreon and haven't had responses to all questions. I don't know if you would be able to answer all of them because it feels like whenever I watch a new BreadTube video, I always have new questions or fears or something else to be depressed by. I don't always agree with what the essayists say, like FD Signifier and Big Joel, but I don't have as strong of arguments to counter them. I'm depressed, can't write, can't watch anything or play anything, afraid to even have a social media account, and a bunch of other things wrong. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your difficulties. Thank you for being a patron. Thank you for your support. I will say this, turning to content creators like myself, like the others that you mentioned in your question, in the hopes that they will personally help you with your personal problems is probably not a good idea. It's probably not the best way forward. It would be much better if you could find someone in your life that you actually knew who you could talk these problems through with, or I mean, whether it's someone in your actual, you know, real life in your actual physical vicinity, or if it's someone that online. But it's much better to do that than to message someone on Patreon who you've subscribed to and say, hey, can you tell me the meaning of life, or can you tell me how to solve my problems? I personally am not a good person to go to for that. I can't speak for Big Joel or the others, but I would imagine they are not necessarily the best guides or counselors either. So I would counsel you this much. I would counsel you not to turn to YouTubers and such for advice and counsel beyond what we choose to present in hopefully a responsible and measured way in the content that we create. Because I know for myself, and I describe myself this way frequently, and I'm not just saying that. I'm just a dipshit with a YouTube channel. Like, I have no more insight into how anybody should live their life or how anybody should respond to their problems or their fears and anxieties than anybody else does. So but I'm sorry to hear that you're having trouble, and I hope it gets better. Andy Lawler, who is apparently overqualified to be Attorney General of the United States. Me too. How about that? Hey, Steve, billionaires are inherently evil, even the ones the collective you like. CEOs are almost certainly evil, and health insurance company CEOs are pretty much war criminals. I've already stated publicly that I'm going to condone violence on this one. The UHC CEO was a particularly heinous villain. The trash got taken out. I will lose exactly no sleep over him or his family, who live in the lap of luxury funded by blood money. They know it, we know it. So to my question, what's your favorite pizza? By that, I mean toppings and type of crust, but also your preferred chain if you can't get it from your favorite local place. Bon appetit and have a great weekend, everybody. Live your life in a way that doesn't make the entire internet celebrate your murder. And once again, as we've talked about earlier in this stream when we were covering things in the live chat before I started the patron questions. Yeah, Andy, I pretty much agree with you there. I mean, I don't, like I said, in principle, I don't condone violence. In principle, I don't recommend or celebrate the murder of a person like that. But like you, am I going to lose any sleep over it? Am I going to shed any tears over it? No, I'm not. No, I'm not. My favorite crust historically has been thin crust. There's a place around here. I think it's a chain, but it's not like a big chain. We only we have one in this area, and I think there's another one in Martinsburg. I honestly don't know if it's like a regional or a national chain or not, or if it's just, these couple of places. But it's called Lito's Pizza, and they have amazing thin crust pizza. Just amazing. So that would be my favorite in terms of type of crust and place. As far as toppings, it really depends. If I get pizza during the week when I'm not eating meat, I really like maybe something like red onions and olives and mushrooms. I really like mushrooms on pizza. And if it's on the weekend when I'm allowing myself to eat meat, probably something classic like, pepperoni and sausage, and probably throw some mushrooms on that too. I like a good old fashioned basic margarita pizza. That's usually what I'm having on Wednesday when Dana and I are watching something for our live stream, our watch along live stream when we're eating pizza. For me, it's usually a frozen DiGiorno thin crust margarita pizza. And, there are restaurants around here where you can get a proper one. I don't always have to get a frozen one. So yeah, a good margarita pizza is good as well. Yeah. But those are probably my favorite pizzas and toppings. Isaiah Taylor. So what is Star Trek to you, Steve? Where does you draw the line between it's just a TV show to this society sucks and I wish we had the Star Trek society now? I'm going to be honest, living in this world, especially for a minority with autism, kind of sucks, dude. Every day I leave my janitorial job drained, exhausted from masking, and tired. So if I just want to come home and join the gang on the Enterprise, then so be it. Even if that society never comes to pass, it's just pure escapism that I wish could be true. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. Question. Do you think Trekkies are too involved in trying to actually make the Star Trek universe happen in our real time, as opposed to just enjoying it for entertainment value? No. I mean, it depends on how that manifests, but in general, no. I mean, Star Trek is for entertainment value, and Star Trek is just a TV show, but it also is a TV show that is made intentionally with things to say, with commentary and critique of our actual society. And I think it has a point way more often than it doesn't. I think when Star Trek does have something to say about our society, and it does have some challenge to make about the way we are doing things now, and argues or perhaps just implies that we should be doing things differently, I think it's usually, it's usually on the right track. It's usually making the right argument. So in that way, I think it should be taken as more than just a TV show, because clearly it's intended, it has something to say. It's not just, oh, look at the people fighting the aliens in space. Like, that's not all that it is. It is pulp sci-fi, but it's pulp sci-fi with a political voice and a message and a social conscience. Um, I do think it's a little silly for people to try to or expect that there will ever be anything that is close to literally like the world of Star Trek. I would like to think that someday we'll get beyond the kind of economy we have now, where I would like to think at some point we will get to a place in our cultural evolution where we're not requiring people to trade their labor for the tools of their survival. I would like to think at some point we will get to the point where we realize that ending poverty is really just a matter of priority. That if enough of us get together and decide that we're not going to allow people in our country or indeed in our world to live in poverty anymore, that we're just, that we can do that. Like we can rearrange our resources. We can resort our priorities as a civilization in such a way that poverty doesn't exist anymore, that people don't have to go into debt to receive medical treatment that will save their life, that we can make living on this planet in this life less of a burden for people. Like we can do that. We have the power to do that. We just lack the will to do it. And I would like to think at some point, probably not in my lifetime, but at some point, humanity will get to a point in its history and evolution where we will realize that on a large enough scale and we will make changes like that, probably over time, but eventually we'll get there. Will it look like it looks in Star Trek? Probably not. Will there be faster than light travel? Probably not. Will there be transporters and, magic food cubby holes where the food just materializes out of thin air? Probably not. But will there be more grounded, realistic analogs of those things? Yeah, probably for some of it. So I don't think it'll ever be literally like, oh, it's just like Star Trek. But I think we can get to the point where we have a society that is superior to the one we have now in the same ways that the Federation and Star Trek is. I think we can get to a point where the unnecessary suffering is reduced, if not eliminated, at least greatly reduced. And like I said, I don't expect to see that in my lifetime, but I would like to think that it's possible and that someday we'll get there. But will it? And if we can use Star Trek as part of the inspiration to remind us that such a thing is possible, then I think that would be great. But will it look like Star Trek? Probably not. But I'm okay with that because Star Trek's just a TV show. Kara the Tolkien Nerd. Hi, Steve. Hope you are keeping well. Weather is a bit grim here, but as it's winter, I suppose it can't be helped. Actually, I have loads of questions. In fact, I'm thinking of starting a book. Now I know you're not much of a TNG fan. You're wrong. I love TNG. I prefer Deep Space Nine, but I love TNG. Anyway, having just watched Ensign Row, I'm forced to ask the question, why are all Starfleet admirals corrupt, mad, or just dangerous to know? I mean, I can't be the only person who thinks that this is a pattern that keeps repeating. Any thoughts? Kara, I mean, yeah, it's a pattern because, it's a TV show, it's a drama, and it's a source of suspense and drama to have, oh, the boss is evil. Oh my God, what are we going to do? The boss is evil. The person giving you the orders has been revealed as someone who is unfit to give you orders. And now you, as someone under their authority, have to decide, are you going to follow their orders, even though you know it's wrong? Or are you going to defy their orders and do the right thing, but at great risk to yourself and those who follow you? Like, that's a really dramatic situation. So that's why that happens so often. And it does throw into question the vetting process of Starfleet. And if like we were just talking about in the last question, if the world of the Federation and Starfleet is so utopian, and if humanity in particular has evolved beyond its baser instincts and its vices and its corruption, why are there so many evil admirals? Like, why is it apparently so easy for so many mentally unbalanced and amoral people to attain positions of incredible power and authority? Doesn't seem consistent. It's a TV show. I don't really care. As long as it makes a good story, I'm fine with it. But yeah, it is a pattern. It is a pattern that keeps repeating. And as long as it keeps yielding good stories and good episodes, I'm okay with that. MW Ridra, good morning, Steve. I was waiting to see if you made a video on this, but nothing yet. I was curious on your thoughts on the UHC CEO getting lead poisoning and how people are reacting to it. For example, so far, 76,000 of the 81,000 reactions to UHC's official Facebook post about it are laugh reacts. I think the response I've seen that mirrors my own sentiments the most is it's important to live your life in such a way that when you're gunned down in public, the reaction from most people isn't like the Ewoks after watching the second Death Star explode. Oh, that's a good way to put it too. That's a good way to put it too. Yeah, that's if to all the CEOs who are watching the reaction of people to the murder of this UHC CEO, and you are saying, "Oh my God, how could this be happening? Why do so many people hate us?" If that's the question you're asking, find the answer within. Look within. Ask yourself, what have you done in your life on this earth, in your career? What have you done in your capacity as the leader of your company? What has your company done under the leadership of you and your fellow executives to warrant such a response from so many members of the public when one of you is murdered? Look within. Ask yourself, what have I done that could possibly have led people to feel this way about people like me? That would be my advice to any CEOs or executives or billionaires, whatever walk of life you may be in. What if you're alarmed and worried and concerned about this, and you're like, well, what is this? Why do so many people hate us? Look within. Look within. Ask yourself. Yeah, I love that metaphor. People reacting like the Ewoks watching the Death Star explode. That's fantastic. Stephen G. Clenard. Hey, Steve, here's a new one for you. What would be your ideal presidential cabinet filled entirely with recurring characters from Deep Space Nine? You'll need secretaries of state, defense, health and human services, agricultural, education. God fucking damn it, we are also thoroughly fucked. What the fuck is wrong with this country? Computer and program. Also, they can't all be Garrick. See you in hell. They would all be clones of Wayun. Thank you for your question. Excellent question. Joe McClory. A book has changed the way I have framed thought. The Maid and the Crocodile by Jordan Ifueko is great, among other things, is about how those with less power are trained to feel that it is natural that they have less power. The part that really got me as I read it in the days leading up to Thanksgiving was the idea of giving thanks and gratitude is a tool for keeping people in their place. The idea that it is rude and out of line to demand to be treated fairly instead of being thankful to the scraps that the powerful give us, or more accurately, how little power people are allowed to keep. I think this is a big part of why Thanksgiving is the holiday progressive people dread compared to Christmas, although both are often about enjoying meals with family, even with the context of Christmas being about actually giving and receiving. How do you feel about the framing of gratitude as a tool to reinforce hierarchy? If not, have you read anything that has changed how you thought recently? Well, here's my feeling about gratitude as a tool to reinforce hierarchy. I think that is true. I think that does happen. I have seen it happen in families and friend groups, and certainly it happens much larger scale in our culture. I think that gratitude is something that should always be given freely instead of being expected or compelled. Gratitude to me only means anything when it is given freely and sincerely. And if you do something for somebody else, expecting to be repaid or expecting to be shown gratitude or expecting any particular response from them, and then you blame them or you punish them for not showing you the proper gratitude, I feel like 9 times out of 10, that's your problem. And obviously we're talking about stuff like outside of things that you're like contracted to do. I mean, if you're an employer and you have agreed to pay your employees a certain wage and give them certain benefits, then that's what you should do, period. And and they should hold up their end of it as well. Like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in terms of like freely associating with people, or in theory freely associating with people, and you sort of weaponizing the expectation or the convention of gratitude, say thank you, like that kind of thing. I do think we should be grateful when people are kind to us, when people are giving of themselves and their time and their resources to us. I think it's a wonderful thing to be grateful and to say thank you to people and to want to repay people if they have done you a solid. You want to give them something back. I think reciprocity is incredibly important. It's been a part of our species since before we were human, but it needs to be free. I mean, it needs to be freely chosen. It can't be enforced, or it doesn't mean anything. Then it just becomes another form of coercion and domination, and we have enough of those already. So I think the general idea of giving thanks and gratitude being used as a tool for putting people in their place and keeping them there, I think that's a really, really sharp observation and a really valid observation, and I do think that happens a lot. And it sucks. And it sounds like an interesting book, The Maid and the Crocodile. A patron enjoying your late night releases on YouTube, but finds them reminiscent of Trump's late night tweets. Or are they called excrements? We had a Dickens-esque choice to make, and we chose the worst of times. Foolishness, incredulity, and darkness. An orange thug preyed upon our unsubstantiated fears and manipulated us into voting against our best interests. Trump 45 was bad. Yet I find myself wondering, would it not have been better if he was reelected 4 years ago? Don't get me wrong, no Trump is infinitely and preferably better. Trump 45 could have continued to ineptly govern and ruin the economy. Democrats may have stayed in and probably gained more control of the legislature, mitigating the severity of damage. Instead, he got 4 years to distance himself from his ineptness, and Americans have short memories. Trump 47 now has a plan, Project 2025, and a vendetta. Hindsight is 2020, and you can't change the past, a la Star Trek. We must live with our choices, endeavor to choose more wisely in the future, and above all, remember our lessons. If we can do this, better times, wisdom, and a season of light can still be possible. Here's to an epoch of belief. Wonderfully said. Wonderfully said. Yeah, we can look back, we can second guess ourselves, but the best we can do is learn from the past and try not to repeat it when the opportunity comes around again. That's the best we can do. Asking ourselves, would it have been better if Trump had just won again, had just won a second consecutive term? Then we would almost be rid of him by now. That's maybe an interesting hypothetical question, but it doesn't really get us anywhere, does it? It's just relitigating the past in a way that I don't think is helpful. We have to focus on today and tomorrow. That's what we can control. So yeah, but beautifully said there. Siamak, who is submitting later than he'd like, but hey, it's a submission. Greetings, Steve. I hope you're well. I appreciate all the content you've been putting out lately. Great stuff. Maybe I won't say/ask something political this week. I really enjoyed the latest late seating uncut, The Shining. It was fucking hilarious in places. Obviously, Kubrick was a genius prick. I'm sure they're out there, but can you think of any other well-known, if not iconic, directors who essentially forced their actors to be method or just outright abused them like Kubrick? Okay, it's political, but not politics. Everything is political. I think we mentioned him very briefly during the Shining review, but Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock was known to be abusive, particularly to his leading ladies. Some of this was because he developed sort of fixations or fascinations with them and started to kind of, assert ownership over them. And, there's a really infamous story of when he was working with Tippi Hedren on The Birds, where he tied real birds to her during to get one of the shots where she's, her character is being attacked by birds. And so he tied real birds to her so that there would be real birds like pecking at her and flapping their wings around her and stuff, because he decided that the performance she was giving when they tried to do it with fake birds wasn't good enough. So he's like, oh, we'll try it with real birds. And a lot of people thought that that was, vindictive, that he wasn't just doing it for artistic reasons to get a better performance. Not that that would have justified it, but, that he was doing it vindictively because she had displeased him in some way and he was punishing her for it. There's a famous story of, and I don't think Akira Kurosawa was generally known to be a difficult director for actors to work with. I've never heard that he was like a Kubrick type of abusive director on the set, but there is a famous / infamous story of how, in order to get the performance he wanted out of Toshiro Mifune on the set of Throne of Blood, he had these stunt archers. There's a big battle scene where there are arrows being fired, and there's a shot where I can't remember the character's name, but the Macbeth analog from Throne of Blood that Toshiro Mifune was playing. He was supposed to get shot. He eventually does get shot by an arrow, but he was supposed to get arrows were supposed to be shot close to him, and he was supposed to just barely miss, right? And they were using fake arrows. It was like a stunt where the arrow would, like the arrow would kind of pop out from the target and it would look like the arrow had been shot, but actually it was already there. And they were using that kind of technique. And for whatever reason, Kurosawa was not pleased with the performance that Toshiro was giving him. So he had the archers, who were professional stunt archers, who were very good shots, but they were shooting real arrows, and he just had them shoot real arrows right next to where Toshiro Mifune was. And, if they had been off a little bit on their aim, or if he had moved a little bit in an unexpected direction, he could have been really fucked up. It was an incredibly dangerous thing to do. And it was done supposedly, to get the shot and to get the performance, which I don't know if that is really enough to justify that. But yeah, there have been stories of legitimately brilliant, great, genius directors who have done unforgivably terrible things to actors on the set, other than Kubrick. Yeah, for sure. Eric Paslick, thinking about this being Lower Decks last season reminded me of when it began. I was watching the premiere episode with a friend who was not a Star Trek fan, and while I was uninspired, he was totally lost. Without watching previous Star Trek series, he could barely understand what was going on and was completely confused by the attempted humor. So I've been thinking, which Trek series and or movies can a first-time viewer watch without needing to have seen a previous series to understand? TOS and TNG certainly, but what about the others? How would you rate them easiest to hardest for a newbie to understand and enjoy? Actually, I think, with the possible exceptions of Lower Decks and the third season of Picard, I think pretty much all of them are, whether they're good or not is a separate question. But I think pretty much all of them are accessible enough that even if you haven't seen Star Trek before you start watching that show, like, you can follow what that show is trying to tell you. I think with the later series, the more you've seen going in, the more it might resonate with you. Like, if you start watching Strange New Worlds and you've never seen any Star Trek before, there are a lot of references and things that you might not fully grasp the significance of. But you'll still be able to follow the story, and you'll still be able to, you'll get to know those characters on that show. Like, it doesn't demand that you have seen everything that came before it. With Lower Decks, it is a bit of a unique situation because so much of that show is devoted to Easter eggs and to jokes that make reference to other things. And like half of the things the characters talk about are just them taking turns referencing stuff that happened on previous Star Trek shows. So in that case, yeah, that will probably be a barrier to people who who are not Star Trek fans already, because the show is not funny in its own right. And I mean, when they do write their own jokes that aren't references, the comedy writing is terrible and weak. And if you don't understand the reference they're making, like it's difficult for me to get how anybody could get anything out of that show, even in theory, if they're not already like a big Star Trek fan. Although I have heard from some people who claim that they started watching it without being big Star Trek fans and they enjoyed it. So, your mileage may vary, but yeah, I think with you just have to, you have to separate yourself from the mindset of, I need to be caught up on my homework before I watch this, right? If you just sit down and watch the show and you pay attention to it, if you watch Star Trek Discovery or Star Trek Strange New Worlds from the beginning, or Star Trek Prodigy, or I mean, Prodigy I think is designed to be accessible to new viewers because it's conceived as a children's show. So a Prodigy shouldn't be any problem at all, even though there are a lot of references to other Star Trek stuff. I don't think that should be a barrier to enjoying the show at all, because the show is mostly about its characters and not about the references it's making, which is one of the reasons why it's such a great show and why I think it's so much better than Lower Decks. But any of those shows, and even, Voyager and Deep Space Nine and Enterprise, like the post TNG shows from the previous era, if you sit down and watch them and you take them on their own terms and you pay attention and you learn who the characters are, those shows are not inaccessible or incomprehensible to people who haven't seen Star Trek before. Again, whether you'll find it interesting or not is a different matter. Whether you'll think it's any good or not is a different matter. But in terms of, can you sit down and just start watching it cold without having seen a bunch of Star Trek before? I think most Star Trek shows you can do that with. I think most of them you can do that with. Simon Moody. Hey, Steve, I really had expected more of a pause after the election, a chance to take a breath and get ready for the next 4 years. More fool me. Our government swaps over inside a day, so there isn't any sort of pause or lame duck period, but you guys usually love to take your time. So that said, I am trying to hang on to things that are more pleasant to think about. Hence the following question. You've recently said that your favorite Star Trek character is Ben Sisko, and probably also the one you respect most. I was wondering, though, who would you most like to spend time with? I'm not just talking in setting or anything like that. Just who would you think you'd enjoy their company, like to have as a part of your social circle, be it for pure friendship, likability, or for someone you think you'd find interesting to be around? That's a really good question. I think Geordi would be a good hang. I think it would be fun to hang out with Geordi. Nurse Chapel from Strange New Worlds seems like a ton of fun. I would love to hang, specifically Nurse Chapel from Strange New Worlds, not Nurse Chapel from Classic Trek. She's the most boring human being I could imagine ever being around. But Nurse Chapel from Strange New Worlds is fucking awesome. I would love to hang out with her. Jadzia Dax seems like a lot of fun. Once he grows up and becomes like more of an adult, I think Jake Sisko from Deep Space Nine would be a great hang. Like, he's just like a normal person. There are a handful of characters in Star Trek that seem like they're just he's just a normal person. So I think Jake would be fun to hang out with. Yeah, I think those are the ones that jump immediately to mind as the characters that, I would. Riker, come on. Riker would be a good hang. Riker would be a really good hang. Yeah, I think those are the big ones. Russell. Hey, Steve, how are you? I am still taking a break from serious political questions. I live in a red state and I grow tired of the conversation. So instead, let's discuss something less contentious. Voyager. I said what I need to about your 12 episodes, but you mentioned a Neelix video you had done that I had not fully watched until 2 nights ago when you mentioned it. I, too, find the whole Kes and Neelix relationship disturbing. Not because she is 2, it's fiction, and her species is written to live like 9 years, so they age, 10-ish years per year? That would make her 20-ish, and Neelix is still 45 plus. You mentioned Angel. I, too, had a problem with that relationship on Buffy. Same reasons. Anyway, then came Tuvok, and watching that video made me think of Riddle's episode. In case you've forgotten that one, it's the one where Tuvok is hit with a weapon and essentially has emotions throughout the episode. I thought it was good, and my opinion, I'd like to hear yours. I remember that that episode exists, but I have no memory of ever watching that episode. I know I have watched it because I've seen every Voyager episode at least once. So I know that I have watched it, but I think that was from maybe season 6 or season 7 when, God, with other than there are a few highlights that pop up in those later seasons, but for the most part, I mean, man, that show was on autopilot. I mean, they were just cranking out episodes. I don't know if the writers knew what they were writing half the time in the later seasons of Voyager. It was just Star Trek, Star Trek, Star Trek, Star Trek. And every once in a while they would accidentally make a good episode. But no, I remember that that episode exists, and when you describe it in your question, it sounds familiar, but it has been a very long time since I have watched it. I have no specific memory of that episode or of what I may have felt about it. So and yours is the last question from the patrons and members. So I'm sorry that I don't have a better answer to your question than that, other than I know it's a thing, but I don't remember. But that's all I got for you, buddy. I know that riddles is a thing, but I just don't remember. So sorry about that. Hopefully I won't have to apologize for this though, because that's the end of the patron and member questions. I'm going to turn my full attention to the live chat in just a moment. But first, it's time for, I think it's my favorite feature of the show. And I hope that some of you enjoy it as well. And that is, it's time to premiere a brand new Stuffy and Friends short. Now, this that I'm about to show you will go live on my channel tomorrow as a standalone short. But because you are kind enough, and if I may say, have good taste enough to be watching this show right now, you get to see it before anybody else. So please enjoy the premiere of a brand new, and I do mean brand new because I just shot this fucker earlier this week, a brand new Stuffy and Friends short. Here we go. It's officially the Christmas season. Best Christmas movie. Go, Stuffy.
Miracle on 34th Street.
Also my pick. God, we're so much alike.
I don't know about that.
Basically the same person. Jack.
Bad Santa.
Also a great movie and fully on brand. I love it. Hans. The Muppets Christmas Carol.
Really?
Yeah. Does this surprise you? Do you believe my somber demeanor and fatalistic worldview precludes an appreciation for irreverent whimsy? No,
Of course not.
we contain multitudes.
Who's your favorite Muppet?
Beaker, whose perseverance in the face of unceasing terror and torment provides a sobering but essential role model for us all.
That makes sense.
More of a modest gathering than a multitude.
Ta-da! Hope you all enjoyed that one. You know, Dalek97 says Muppets Christmas Carol is awesome. And on Geek also says I love Muppet Christmas Carol. Probably my hottest take about the Muppets is that I can mostly take or leave the Muppets Christmas Carol. Like, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's a fine movie. I am happy to watch it if anybody ever wants to watch it. It's good, but like, I mean, the way people jizz in their pants over it is a little over the top. Like, it's fine. It's by far not my favorite Muppets movie or my favorite Muppets thing. And it's by far not my favorite version of A Christmas Carol, but it's okay. It's fine. I like Michael Caine. It's got some funny parts. Some of the songs are all right. It's fine. So that's my Muppet related hot take. My cocaine. That John Burns, that might be the funniest thing you've ever said. My cocaine. That is fucking amazing. All right, let me go back and catch up on the live or on the super chats that I have missed. Well, there's a few of them. Thank you everybody for being generous. William Long with a super chat from a while back says, "Hi, Steve. I remember you recapped 1994 and mentioned Scott and Jean's wedding and the Clone Saga. Were you much of a Marvel reader? Who are your favorite Marvel characters? You've always struck me as a Claremont X-Men guy." I have read a little bit of Marvel stuff. I'm not nearly as well read up on Marvel as I am on DC stuff, and I'm not as well read on DC stuff as a lot of people might think. But no, I've read like the major highlights of Claremont's X-Men run, but I was not reading it at the time, and there are major holes in my reading. I know as far as characters, I'm so vanilla and middle of the road. You have no idea. I'm a Spider-Man guy. My Spidey's my favorite. Here's one from Sean O'Sullivan. I see you like the war doctor making the wrong decision on a day it's impossible to be right, but I really respect your drive for the greater good. I will take that as a compliment. Thank you very much. John Burns with a super chat. Game of Thrones scene. Character named the Hound talks about eating chickens. Another character says, you're going to die over chickens? Someone is. Now? You're going to die over better health care? Someone is. Yeah, the fucking CEO of the company. Another one from John Burns. Remember The Shining? Kubrick and Shelley Duvall. Yeah, that was the basis of our conversation about that earlier. The Shining. Yeah, and we talk about that a lot in the podcast. Non-Nobis with a super chat says, do any of the recent Treks match up to the greatness of DS9? Cisco is my favorite too. Not for me personally, no, like not match up to it, but Strange New Worlds comes very close so far. I mean, we're only 2 seasons in with a 3rd season yet to come, hopefully next year. But no, Strange New Worlds to me is the best since Deep Space Nine. But Prodigy is also really, really good. I would, if you're only interested in like the very best of the best, Strange New Worlds and Prodigy are both absolutely excellent. John Burns with another one says, forget the GOP have a 1-seat House majority. Oh, forgot. Yeah, well, I didn't. Another one from John says, Wesley Crusher with abandonment issues episode. Well, that would mean they'd have to abandon him, wouldn't it? Wesley gets too bad. I don't have a big problem with Wesley. Wesley's okay. I made a whole video about that. And another one finally from Kirok. Thank you very much, my friend. Kirok 2011 says, what? No one loves a Christmas story? I love a Christmas story. But I mean, you're asking the animals, you know. Stuffy likes Miracle on 34th Street because he is a dog of taste. And Jack likes Bad Santa, I assume, because he identifies with the main character. And Hans loves a Muppet's Christmas Carol for the reasons that he attempted to elucidate. Let me see, what have I missed from the chat? CMX says, to the who to hang with question, but Riker would be that weird guy that always randomly has a guitar, except it would be a fucking trombone. Well, that's why it comes in handy when you can like detach yourself from the situation. You can remove yourself from the situation you're in and just kind of view it almost as though you're an objective observer. And from that point of view, the fact that Riker always has a trombone and always finds some thin excuse to pull it out and start playing is fucking hilarious. Steve Schmeling says, you said jizz, here we fucking go again. No, we're not going to do any more jizz. We've talked about jizz plenty, I think, over the past few months. Isaiah Taylor says, I would like to hang out with La'an. We would likely bond over not taking shit from people. She never did, and nor did Ro or Tasha. You know, I think La'an would be fun. Yeah, I mean, she's a little severe, but I think we've seen, like, once she kind of gets away from her job and she's able to loosen up a little bit, like, you know, she's a little uptight and a little driven and sort of job oriented, but I think she could be a pretty cool person. Yeah. Marty says, I love the Werner Herzog voice. Thank you very much. Dana quoting maybe my favorite line from A Christmas Story. You used up all the glue on purpose. I love that line, but then I also love, it's in that same conversation when he's like just fuming at his wife he's blaming his wife for breaking the lamp, and the way he looks at her and goes, you always hated it. Oh, I love that so much. Let me see here. David Colby says, I got halfway through Prodigy season 2, got to Will Wheaton's baffling season ruining cameo and fucking bounced, man. It was by far the stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen. We will agree to disagree. I will say that's something that I was, when he shows up at the end of the episode, when he first appears, I was worried. I was like, oh no, don't do this. But they made it work. They made it work. And it's not the first time that Prodigy has done that. Now, obviously we can disagree, and we clearly have very divergent opinions on Star Trek in certain areas. But yeah, the Wesley appearance when he first pops up at the end of that episode as like a cliffhanger, I was like, oh man, oh no. But they made it work, and I thought it worked really, really well, actually, all said and done. CMX says, I think Jadzia would have to be the best hang, and the stories, they'd always have another. Oh, that's true. I wasn't even thinking about the the symbiote and the multiple lifetimes thing. I was just thinking how she just seems like a cool, relaxed, laid back, fun, up for anything person to hang out with. But yeah, the stories as well. John Bird says Wesley's mom left in season 2, dad already dead. Good point. How can you get more abandoned than that? Geek says, on the topic of leftists versus progressives, we do mutually frustrate each other. Yes, and that's another important point as well for that question from earlier. Yes, the people who are further to the left than me that I am frustrated with, I'm sure that many of them are frustrated with people like me as well. It's a mutual thing. John Collins with a super chat says, I enjoyed your video about how you can't always be friends with people on the other side because there are non-negotiables. I agree. However, the difficulty is that there are 77 million of them. So now what? You avoid the ones you can and try your best to keep peace with the ones you can't. Oh, Dana would, yeah, not a finger. That's a good one too. Not a finger. That's a good one too. Yeah, Nana again with a good point. They did it to themselves. Yeah, that's absolutely. Kirok with a super chat. Steve, curious, you have only one series to watch. Star Trek, of course. Just go with me. Which do you like more? Voyager, Picard, or TOS and why? Oh, God, of those three, TOS, easily. Oh, fuck. If the only three I have to choose from are the TOS all day. All day, all night, forever. There are just so many more great episodes. Like I just did a whole video about Voyager episodes that I like. There are good Voyager episodes. There are even a very, very, very tiny handful of decent Picard episodes. But my God, TOS, shit, man. Just in the first season, you've got a bunch of genuinely classic episodes. And season 2 begins with my favorite episode of the whole series, Amok Time, which is also one of my favorite episodes just of all Star Trek. Like, no, TOS easily. Isaiah says, what about Ortegas? She's Ortegas. Oh my God. Yes. Yes. I love Ortegas so much. Ortegas is one of my favorite characters on that show. I would love to hang out with Ortegas. And she's another one. Like, even though she's an officer and she's obviously highly skilled at her job, she also seems like just kind of a normal person. And I think she would be a really good, fun person to hang out with for sure. Brad Freeman says Skeleton Crew is the prodigy of Star Wars. Actually, yeah. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, I watched it's the first 2 episodes of Skeleton Crew are out now. I watched them earlier this week. I liked it so far, and it reminds me a little bit of Prodigy, sure, because it's kids. But you know what else it reminded me of? Fucking Star Wars. And I'm not someone like, I have enjoyed some of the new Star Wars shows. Like, I thought the first season of The Mandalorian was really good. I thought The Acolyte was pretty good. I didn't think it was like outstanding, but it kept my interest, and I thought it was, and I liked the way it told a standalone story with original characters until they kind of fucked it up at the very end with, the big Easter egg at the end. But I liked The Acolyte. And I liked the sequel trilogy more than I didn't like it. I'll put it that way. I didn't like everything about it, but I loved The Last Jedi, and I liked The Force Awakens, and I didn't like Rise of Skywalker, but I didn't hate it as much as a lot of people did. But no, the Skeleton Crew really, it felt like, oh, this really feels like Star Wars. This feels like a fun adventure movie. And it probably should have been a movie. It's, I'm already kind of feeling like when we get to the end of this, I'll probably have liked it, but I'll probably also be thinking, why couldn't they have just made this a movie? But no, I've enjoyed it so far, and it feels very much like, throwback, fun, sci-fi adventure story Star Wars. Let me see. Dagoonite says, what would be the name of your Star Trek themed garage band? I would never have that. I would never have that. And also, I can't think of a name. What would be the name of my, I don't know, Riker's Raiders. Strange Duck says, how is Neelix the ambassador to an alien species, but can't call Tuvok by his name? Right? Oblique Le Freak says, which is better, Picard or Discovery after season 2? Discovery. Not even close. I will say there is no single episode of Discovery that is as good as the best episode of Picard, which is, what is it, episode 4 of season 3? No Win Scenario. Like, as much as I do not like Picard as a series, and as much as I do not like season 3 of Picard, that episode is fantastic. That's a really good episode. I don't know if Discovery has a single episode that is as good as that. But as a series, even post season 2, which I agree was the creative high point for Discovery, even after that, no, Discovery's a better show. Discovery's just a way better show than Picard. Paul Hammond says, I always thought Mr. Vulcan was his name. Everyone I know is called Mrs. Human. It's a good point. John Collins says, like early 90s WCW before I got Hoganized. Yes. Oh my God, dude. So early 90s WCW is one of my favorite eras of pro wrestling. Not because it was good, because looking back on it now, a lot of it is really, 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 really bad. But that was what I was watching when I was a kid. Like, that was my wrestling. Same thing with early to mid 90s WWF. Like, same thing. A lot of it creatively is fucking awful. But I have nostalgia for it because that's what I was watching. That's the wrestling I watched on Saturday mornings. You know, that was my wrestling. So I have great affection for it and great nostalgia for it. And I will say, even looking back on it creatively speaking, and trying to look at it, you know, and judge it with my eyes as an adult today. Yeah, I think early 90s WCW I prefer it to post Hogan, pre NWO WCW for sure. Yeah. I mean, I know the company got a lot more financially successful after Hogan got there, but creatively, not so much. I would much rather watch a wrestling show that revolved around guys like, you know, Sting and Lex Luger and Ric Flair and Arn Anderson and Bobby Eaton and Ricky Steamboat and Dustin Rhodes and, you know, and Rick Rude when he got there, when he jumped from WWF. I would much rather watch that. And Steve Austin, pre-Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was great. I would much rather watch that than watch, you know, the reheated Hulkamania show that it became starting in 94. Let me see. I'm going through some more of the questions, but I can't remember who asked it. And I'm sorry if you're still here and you asked it and I'm not remembering, I'm not mentioning your name, but somebody asked, what is my favorite version of A Christmas Carol? Because earlier I said the Muppets isn't my favorite Christmas Carol. My favorite version of A Christmas Carol is my favorite Christmas Carol movie. I'll put it that way. My favorite Christmas Carol movie is the Alastair Sim version from 1951 that I think was actually released under the title Scrooge. And the on-screen title is Scrooge, but it's been released on video and DVD a bunch of different times. And sometimes it's released under the title of A Christmas Carol. Sometimes it's released under the title Scrooge, but it's an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. And Alastair Sim plays Scrooge. And I love that so much. That's my favorite film of A Christmas Carol, for sure. John Burns with a super chat says, watching She-Hulk, Tatiana Maslany did an amazing job on Orphan Black. Hated to see She-Hulk canceled. Yeah, me too, because I really like She-Hulk. I thought She-Hulk was terrific. It was one of my favorite of the Disney Plus Marvel series. I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was hilarious. So, you know, I'm a little sad that they didn't do any more than the first season either. But the season that they did was really, really good. Steve Schmeling says, about pizza, my favorite is stuffed crust or pan. Both are excellent. I agree with you there. And I am partial to pineapple. I also sometimes drizzle blue cheese dressing. I will die on this hill. I've never tried it with blue cheese dressing, so I can't speak to that. But pineapple is not my favorite, but I really do. I really like pineapple on pizza. I really, really do. So I will always take that side in the seemingly endless debate over whether pineapple belongs on pizza. I think it absolutely does. Treaders says, how deep is the right-wing media in the U.S.? And how much misinformation is there from right-wing media? I see a lot of clips on YouTube, but it's hard to gauge how it is on a day-to-day basis there. Well, I mean, it depends on how much you can choose not to pay attention to it. I mean, the really ardently, like, avowedly right-wing stuff. You can just choose not to pay attention to it, and it's not like you're constantly drowning in it. But it does have an effect on the overall media. I mean, it does have a very insidious influence. There's a lot of it. I mean, how deep is it? It's pretty much bottomless. Yeah, and in a lot of ways. Oh, John Burns agrees with me. A Christmas Carol from 1951 is the Christmas movie. There you go. There you go. It's not my favorite Christmas movie. My favorite Christmas movie is still the original Miracle on 34th Street, but it's definitely by far my favorite version of A Christmas Carol. And I love A Christmas Carol. Christmas Carol, I love A Christmas Carol. I love the book. I love the Patrick Stewart audio book, which is just a recorded version of him doing his one-man show of A Christmas Carol. Yeah, I love A Christmas. It's one of my favorite Christmas stories. And the 1951 Alastair Sim version is my favorite film of it. Nishiki and Taki, WWF light WCW. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Dana, you don't think Die Hard is a Christmas movie? Can I just say, I don't care either way. That is not a hill that I am prepared to die on. And I think it's kind of funny that people still argue about it, and that there are so many like strongly held opinions about whether or not Die Hard is a Christmas movie. I don't care one way or the other. If it's a movie that you like to watch at Christmas time, then it's a Christmas movie. You know, it's not part of my regular Christmas movie rotation. It's not a movie I watch like every year on Christmas. But I do like it. I do like Die Hard. Dana asks, what is my favorite pizza topping then? Again, you know, considering, again, like I said about my favorite Marvel character being Spidey, think about how boring and vanilla and middle of the road I am. It's my favorite pizza topping is probably pepperoni, but pepperoni cooked so that it's nice and crispy, especially if the edges are crispy. Oh, yeah, so good. Dana also asks, hey, did anyone send in and ask about the insurance dude? I think like 2 or 3 people did. Yeah. Oh, Isaiah, this is an interesting question. What historical space vehicle would you want Ortegas to fly? The Bell X-1, the Mercury, Gemini, the shuttle, or the T-38 train? Well, I mean, you know, as a lover of the NASA programs in the 60s, obviously it would be cool to say like, oh, the Mercury capsule, but like, you don't really, there's not a lot of flying involved with that. You know, you're, as the astronauts themselves said, you know, you're spam in a can. I mean, there was maneuverability. Like there were things that the astronaut could do to, you know, affect the course of the capsule, but you know, it's not like you were flying it like Ortegas is flying the Enterprise on the show. Probably the space shuttle. I love the space shuttle. It'd be cool to see Ortegas fly the space shuttle. Darylette says, okay, Steve, what do you really think was the reason Kamala Harris lost? I think 1, not enough people's number 1 issue was abortion or corporate welfare. 2, overconfidence. 3, Kamala isn't Obama. I think it was probably a combination of all of those, plus maybe I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that this is the case, but apparently it was the case with some people just who did not take Trump as a serious enough threat. You know, It felt like either they assumed that Trump was going to lose for sure this time, so they didn't need to vote, or they had convinced themselves, well, even if he wins, it's not going to be that bad. Voter apathy. Marty Harris says, what do you think are the political implications of the UHC assassination? I mean, in terms of like partisan politics, electoral politics, there are no political implications that jump right out at me right away. I guess it's only just happened a couple of days ago. We'll have to wait and see what what comes from it. But I mean, I'm not particularly worried about the political implications of it at this moment. Air One Fire says, what are the movies in your yearly Christmas rotation? It does tend to vary from time to time. I almost always find time to watch Miracle on 34th Street. I almost always find time to watch at least one adaptation of Sherlock Holmes, The Blue Carbuncle, either the Jeremy Brett version or the Peter Cushing version from the 60s. I have both of those on DVD. And if I really have time, I will watch both of them at some point, but I try at least to watch one. I usually try to watch the Alastair Sim Christmas Carol. I like to watch the Christmas episode of Perfect Strangers, The Gift of the Meepiat. I like that. I was thinking about that today, actually. I like to watch that one. What else? Sometimes It's a Wonderful Life. Not every year, but every once in a while It's a Wonderful Life. And A Christmas Story is usually on at some point, and I'll watch. I usually don't make like a special effort to watch A Christmas Story, but I've seen it like a million times. But if I'm like, watching TV and A Christmas Story is on, and like it's on 24 hours a day on TNT when you get close to Christmas, I'll watch it. So it usually gets in there somehow. Dana says, unpopular opinion, I don't like the movie Elf. When we reviewed it for late seating, I thought it was fine. I will say, I think it's a fine movie. I really don't get why it has become like a modern day classic. Like it's for especially for younger people, it's kind of become the equivalent to like A Christmas Story, where it's the movie that they look forward to watching I really don't get that. I don't think it's that good. I don't think it warrants becoming an annual tradition. But I think it's fine. Kirak 2011 with a super chat says, is Die Hard a Christmas film? Yes, it takes place during Christmas, but look at the soundtrack, look at the themes, and then answer honestly. It's like saying It's a Wonderful Life is a Christmas film. Well, It's a Wonderful Life is a Christmas film. What are you trying to say? Some random geek, the Iron Giant. Ooh. Yeah. Oh, Steve. Yeah, Steve Schmeling is also a fan of the crispy pepperoni. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Oh, yes, and the Rankin Bass special. Someone mentioned the Rankin Bass specials as well. Yeah. Yeah. I like to watch I have a set of a bunch of those on DVD as well. Again, it's not something I watch every single year, but if I have time and if I think about it, I love to watch like Santa Claus is Coming to Town and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And of course, we're watching Rudolph for this year's late seating Christmas episode. And I'm going to watch it ahead of time to prepare and kind of write jokes for it, but we're also going to be watching it Jason and I are going to be watching it together as we record the show, so it'll be a commentary track. Because that's what we do every year for Christmas. We do a special commentary track episode where you're meant to listen to our show while you're also playing the movie that we're reviewing. So if you're a late seating fan, make sure you dig yourself out a copy of Rudolph of the Rankin Bass, the stop motion Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, because that's what we're doing for Christmas this year. CMX says, regarding election despair, the GOP is already preparing for 2026. We have to get ready. Worst thing we can do is, by depressing turnout, make people believe their vote doesn't matter. I agree completely. I think we need to be beating that drum all year round, whether it's an election year or not, because there are so many people who have either convinced themselves or been convinced by the culture and by circumstances that their vote doesn't matter, and that it doesn't make a difference which party is in power. And, that has become a very prevailing narrative, and that only helps Republicans. That only helps Republicans. If you convince people that it doesn't make a difference which side is in power, and people don't vote because of that, that only helps Republicans, because there are enough Republican voters who fucking know better that will continue to vote, while Democrats and people on the left will decide to sit it out. John Burns with a super chat. Canada sells oil to the U.S., so tariffs are going to increase energy costs to people in the U.S. Also, automobile prices will go up in the U.S. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, buddy. There were a bunch of us trying to tell people before the election, like, hey, if your major concern for this election is economic reasons, you need to be voting for Harris, not for Trump, because Trump is going to fuck up the economy in a million ways. Another super chat from John Burns. I enjoyed Elf because of James Caan's slow burns. Yeah, there are some good performances in Elf. Someone earlier mentioned Peter Dinklage as well. There are some good performances in Elf. 255 AD says, with regard to the Hunter pardon, should we view it as more of a problem with the pardon power existing rather than Biden? Like, I'm sure most good dads would do the same thing. That's similar to things I've said about it. Like, to the extent that I do have a problem with it, most of my problem is just the problem I have with the pardon power in general. I don't particularly blame Biden for doing it, or I'm not especially mad at him for doing it, given the circumstances. Well, Geek, you can do direct action in addition to voting. I've never told people to only vote, and I've never said that voting is the only thing necessary. But if you are motivated enough, and you care enough, and you are capable enough to take part in direct action, to do something beyond electoral politics, I think that's great. But if you have the energy and the capability to do that, you also have the energy and the capability to vote. So vote. Like, saying we should do direct action, we should do, something other than electoral politics, that's great. That's not an excuse for not voting. Do both. Do both. If you have the energy to do, direct action, then vote in addition to the direct action. That's not an excuse. And again, I don't think voting is all that's necessary, but voting is incredibly important. And to just act like electoral politics doesn't count. And I'm not saying you're saying this, but a lot of people further to the left than I am either outright say this or act as though this is true, that electoral politics doesn't matter, that somehow, acting outside of electoral politics is all that will be necessary to bring about the necessary changes. And I just don't think that's remotely realistic. So yes, absolutely. Focus on your preferred form of praxis, but also fucking vote. Like, fucking vote. Some more super chats. Let me catch up here. Kirok says, supporting your channel here. Please watch Riddles. I'll make an effort to watch it. Thank you. Thank you for bringing it up, and I will try to watch it. And then some from John Burns. Thank you also, my friend. Says, tariffs in 1930 led to the rise of Hitler. Well, we're doing it backwards. So, Daryl Lett says, the Peanuts characters ice skate to a tune called Christmas Time. Oh, there's something else I do that's part of my Christmas routine. Again, like, not every single year, but if I remember it during the Christmas season, listening to the Vince Guaraldi Peanuts music. Yeah. Oh, nothing says Christmas like the Vince Guaraldi soundtrack from the Charlie Brown Christmas. Also, speaking of offbeat Christmas movies that I try to watch but don't always have time for, Eyes Wide Shut. There's a Christmas movie, buddy. If anybody tries to say that Die Hard is a Christmas movie, but Eyes Wide Shut is not a Christmas movie, I'm sorry. We have to part company there. Eyes Wide Shut is definitely a Christmas movie. And I like the hell out of it. Brad Freeman says, glad to hear you think there will be future elections. You know, I think I've said, Batman Returns, HB Hag, absolutely. Batman Returns, that's another one that's on my list that kind of jumps on and jumps off. But I do try to watch Batman Returns every year around Christmas as well, too. Definitely a Christmas movie. Are you rolling your eyes at Eyes Wide Shut, Dana? Have you ever even seen it? I'm pretty sure you would hate it. But I love it. I love Eyes Wide Shut. I saw it in the theater 5 times. 5 fucking times. By the time I got to the end of those 5 screenings, I was the only one in the fucking theater for the whole thing. And I thought it was great. It was like they were showing the movie just for me. It was awesome. Saw it 5 fucking times. And then later that year, I saw Magnolia 6 fucking times. Eyes Wide Shut. Christmas movie. I was going to say something. Oh, Simon Moody, America doing things backwards. Now there's a quote. Yeah, well, it's how we live. It's how we live. Oh yeah, I was going to about Brad saying, I'm glad to hear you think there will be future elections. I feel like acting as though there won't be future elections is ceding territory to the Republicans. And that's the last thing we need to be doing. Of course, we need to we need to assume that there will be elections because constitutionally there should be elections and democratically there must be elections. And for us to just roll over and play dead and say, well, Trump took over, we might as well give up now because he's probably going to try to cancel elections. Like, no, fuck that. That's giving up. We're not going to do that. We're not going to cede territory to these assholes that, they don't already have. Here's a super chat from Alexi Pappas. Thank you very much. Says, thanks for keeping your viewers sane at the expense of your own over the past few months. Much appreciated and love your kind. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the support and the kind words. I am not on the verge of going insane. I'm doing okay. I'm doing probably as well as someone can be doing given the amount of attention I pay to this shit and the amount of videos I've been making about it. I'm doing okay. I have the ability to kind of step away from it. And I'm very fortunate that my personality and my mental state is such that I tend not to carry things around with me too long. Like I'm able to sort of put things down and walk away from it. And I have taken full advantage of that, believe me, during these past few weeks. John Burns says, I'd love to see you and Doug Walker review a movie. I'd love to see Doug Walker walk into a fucking manhole. So how about that? Paul O'Kelly says, you may need to fight for future elections. That's true. That's very true. We may need to. Thank you, CMAC. See, CMAC and I agree. Isaiah says, have you ever met an astronaut? I don't think I have. Unlike you. No, I don't think I have. There was another one further up here I wanted to. Dana said, you may have already talked about this at some point, but Eyes Wide Shut versus Magnolia. Oh, like which one do I think is a better movie? I think Magnolia is a better movie. I love them both. They are very different from one another, very different stylistically, very different. And obviously, I mean, Paul Thomas Anderson and Stanley Kubrick, like they're two of my favorite directors, but they are vastly different in terms of style and points, areas of interest and that kind of thing. I think I love both movies, but I think Magnolia is a better movie than Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah. David Sampson says, I would love to see more MacGyver reviews. Well, more are coming. Believe me. I'm not giving up on doing videos about MacGyver, especially after the 4 years that we're in for. I'm going to need some MacGyver videos to help me out. Never mind people who watch my videos. I'm not sure what the next Dana wrong Tom Cruise movie, but I like that one too. But no, I have a couple of possibilities for what the next MacGyver video will be about, for what episode it'll focus on. I haven't quite decided yet, but probably next month in January there will be another MacGyver video, and I will make a decision between now and then as to what the subject will be. But I do love my MacGyver videos. All right, it is time to wind this down. So I'm going to step away from the live chat for a few minutes while I wrap up the show, and then I'll come back and get final questions before we end the stream. First of all, I noticed in the chat, some random geek is currently sharing the links to support some friends who need a helping hand. So please make use of those links. If you are in a position where you can help somebody out, if you can spare a few bucks to help someone in need, please consider giving to through one of the links that Geek is sharing in the chat right now. And you can also find all of those and more consolidated at charitylinks.page, which Geek is also sharing in the chat and which is linked in the video description of this live stream. So please make use of charitylinks.page to help out some friends of ours who need a helping hand. Especially since, you know, it's the holiday season and in the spirit of giving and so forth. Also, if you would like to support me and the work I do on this channel, you can do so by becoming a supporter through Patreon, going to patreon.com/Steve Shives, or by clicking the join button right here on the YouTube page to become a channel member. And either way, whether you choose to become a member through YouTube or you choose to become a paid supporter through Patreon, whether you support me at a level of $1 a month or any higher amount you could possibly see fit to bestow upon me, patrons and members at all levels get access to a couple of perks. And one of those is that you get to submit questions early for these Ask Away live streams. These Ask Away live streams are always on a Friday. So the Monday before, I will put up a members only post on my YouTube channel page, my community page, and also on my Patreon page that includes a link to a form that you can go to submit your question. And those are the questions that I answer at the beginning of every Ask Away live stream. So that's just a little extra perk that I offer to folks who see fit to support my channel financially, just to say thank you and to show you that I appreciate you and I could not possibly do this without you. So if you enjoy my YouTube stuff, patreon.com/Steve Shives, or click the join button to become a member. Thank you so much to all of you who have done so for your support. Also, if you like my YouTube stuff, you might also like the podcasts that I'm on. There's Late Seating, the movie review podcast that I'm on alongside the great Jason Harding, where we review classic films and see if they deserve the reputation they have, whether it's good or bad. Our new episode is our review of The Shining. Speaking of Stanley Kubrick movies, The Shining, starring Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. And we review The Shining, and you can, what do you think? Do you think we like it? Do you think I like it and Jason doesn't? Or Jason likes it and I don't? You can find out by listening to the episode. Also, there's another podcast that I'm on, also with Jason and also with Dana, who is still with us here in the live chat. And also our new cast member, Ananda, who has been with us for the past several episodes and is doing a fucking great job. And that is the Star Trek themed improv comedy podcast, The Ensign's Log, where we play original characters who exist in the Star Trek universe. And there are like things from Star Trek episodes are kind of happening off in the background while we're telling our own stories and getting into our own kind of trouble on the show. And it is so goddamn much fun to do this show. And hopefully it's fun to listen to as well if you are an Ensign's Log listener. And if you are not an Ensign's Log listener, but you enjoy Star Trek and you enjoy funny Star Trek and you enjoy stuff that, you know, kind of takes the piss out of Star Trek every once in a while, I would very much encourage you to listen to the Ensign's Log. That is also linked in the description. Thank you very much for that as well. And if you haven't listened to the Ensign's Log or Late Seating yet, I would highly encourage you to do so. I think you will enjoy them. Now, I've seen a whole bunch of super chats popping up in the live chat, so I'm going to catch those and see if I can catch any more final questions from people before I call this to a close. John Burns says, how does Trump pull a Mao or a Hitler or a Lenin and cancel elections in the U.S.? Shouldn't the Democrats just pull a Carter with 50.6% of the vote? Well, I mean, I don't know how he does it. There obviously is no established method for canceling elections. I would not put it past him or his Republican supporters to attempt to do it somehow. Hopefully the answer to your question, how does Trump do that, is he doesn't. He may attempt it, but hopefully he doesn't. John Byrne says, okay, another video with Shane from the podcast. Like Shane, the movie? Well, we already did that. It's a great movie. I love Shane, but we already did that. Kira with a super chat says, thank you for all you do. We disagree sometimes, but you and I oftentimes agree on things like Star Trek and politics. I do appreciate you. Thanks again. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you as well, my friend. And I appreciate your generosity with super chats, and I appreciate you just in general. Kara says, it was great being here. Couldn't make it last Wednesday. Nasty reaction to my heart medication. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better, or hopefully you're feeling better. You're feeling better enough to be here. Paul O'Kelly says, would you ever consider doing reviews of Red Dwarf? I mean, I wouldn't want to say definitely no. But honestly, I've never really watched it. So I would have to watch it first before I reviewed it. But I mean, it seems like the kind of thing I would like. Simon Moody's Adolf Hitler, leader of the runners-up in World War II. Oh, Nishikin Taki says, great review for The Shining. Thank you very much. I really loved watching that movie again, and it was fun to review. Oh, John says, Shane from the Popcast. Oh, okay. I mean, he seems fine. I'm not like super eager to work with him again. He seems like a nice guy, but we seem to have very divergent opinions on Star Trek. I'm sure he's a fine guy, but I'm not like, eager to, oh boy, I hope I get to do a show with Shane again someday. Like, he's fine doing his thing and I'm fine doing mine. If we both end up being a guest on the same show again at some point, okay. Isaiah says, will you and Jason ever review Space Camp? Oh boy, I hope so. I love Space Camp. I just watched that a few months ago, again, for the first time in a while. I love Space Camp. I don't know if we'll ever review it or not, but I would like to. Oh, and I saw Azalea popped in and said, wow, this is still going. Almost done. Not going for very much longer. Brad Freeman says, take care. Best to Jason. Thank you very much. Jason's doing fine, by the way. Erwin Fire says The Shining is definitely a Christmas movie. There you go. John Burns says divergent ideas are good. We all like diversity. It's Star Trek, dude. It doesn't matter. Like divergent ideas. It's differing opinions on Star Trek. I don't really need to spend time with some nerd who has different ideas about me than Star Trek. Like, go jack off to canon if that's your thing. I'm not telling you not to do that. Have fun jacking off to canon. That's not my thing. Your late seating podcasts are all set in TNG, right? Actually, now we're on Deep Space Nine. Okay, I believe that does it, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining me. Once again, I'm going to call these festivities to a close. I appreciate the support. I appreciate the attention. I appreciate you hanging out with me. I hope you have a good rest of your night. I hope you have a good weekend. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.